Hi, everybody, and good evening here from the Temple of Silence, 8 o'clock here in Finland, and different times for you, I know. We have, Tuija and I switched to the 6 o'clock GMT time, both morning and evening. It seems to be what we can best handle, but I know that no time is perfectly convenient for everybody. This morning we continued the Science of Triangles work as we do every 2 weeks, and I see that some of you were there, and thank you for attending. We worked on the idea of sensitivity to what is within oneself, sensitivity to the past, and sensitivity to the distant future, and the different triangular relationships on all levels that had to do with that type of sensitivity. I guess one might say that everything we're doing now to increase our consciousness is all about increasing our sensitivity and being more aware to the revelation which is always present, if we could but, realize it. Realization, revelation, it's always here, and it's only our dullness which prevents us from picking things up the way they are. And of course, glamour is blocking a lot. Our own intense emotions and desires aimed at that which is unworthy or not of value or untrue, really stops the reality from dawning on our consciousness. So before we begin, I just like to have a little alignment, if we can do that, and then we have some interesting material about synthetic illusion. The section on illusion, I think, is not easy, and the mind is in a way more complex than the emotions, and I think, finally it will be more demanding to rid ourselves of illusion even than glamour. I think the time is right for students of our type to be as rid of glamour as may be possible, but illusion is another matter, and is even sustained in a very refined way, as I've mentioned before, up till the 9th initiation. When we finally leave the cosmic physical plane on the way of higher evolution, even if we may return later for service purposes, the illusions with which we are familiar are certainly banished, and many illusions too high for us even to conceive. As a matter of fact, mostly those high illusions are what we call our spiritual state. Well, it's an interesting word, illusion, and as we can tell from our readings during the last weeks, DK is very specific about them. So we'll review them a little bit. I just want to, before we really get into it, I want to welcome Anne Veronica, Annette, Ario, Carl, Deborah, Francois, Helen, Jan, Jean-Pierre, Gretchen, Joan, Karen, Catherine, Layla, Marianne, Martha, Natnia, Nyanke, Sam. Good to see you, Sam. Yvonne and Zenaidi. And here on staff, to make sure I don't wander into the forest or start talking without having any sound on and that kind of thing. BL is there, and Michael Stacy is doing his best to be there. He's having a little bit of internet problem at the moment. But anyway, well backed up on the staff side. So let's just have a little alignment, reminding ourselves of the purpose of our gathering. It is said by some who are cynical that we live in a post-truth era, an era in which we are beyond the truth and it just doesn't count, and we make things up as we go along. But it has to be remembered that that kind of a cautionary statement that's been around a long time, that the devil is the father of lies. So when we misrepresent what we do know and pass that on to others, we make the whole foundation of human progress very shaky. And people don't know what to believe and they lose their trust. And it becomes very difficult to make reasonable progress. So we want the truth without distortions, modifications, and without glamours and without illusions. And we want the truth without the chaos of Maya, which prevents us from manifesting the truth properly. So little groups like this, we offer ourselves to use the hierarchy's methods to help to dissipate first the glamours of the astral plane, wrongly oriented desire for the wrong things, we might say. And then eventually, although fewer are affected, we try to tackle the question of illusion, and that will mean a lot of mental training. And we're not there yet, I think. We have a lot more work to do on that. But anyway, we have come together to offer our mind, our understanding, our soul contact as much as possible for the dissipation of glamour, and we are largely using the technique of light, the technique of light. There are several techniques, and we will be getting into them. Technique of the presence and the technique of divine indifference. But right now, the technique of light is what we're working with. And surely we all agree that if more light were shed on that which people consider when making decisions, the decisions might be other than they are, but people are blinded by their own passions, their own desires, and they shut out a lot of the light. So we just offer ourselves for this kind of work, basically, is what I'm saying. We have, looks like about 24 of us here. So at 20, maybe some people are down more than once, possibly, but 24 is quite a number, the number of Shambhala. And interestingly, if any of us are interested in the advanced schools of the future, it looks like every one of them will have 24 students and 3 so-called teachers or facilitators. I know it's a long way in the future, and we have to do our work for the preparatory schools. And they are on the way, and they are, I think, reasonably attainable. And they will be esoteric inlets for the light and the love and the power. And with the help of the energies that they let in, we can come a long way to clarifying the atmosphere in which human consciousness has to function. So let's make our way then, let's make our way through the readings. You know, we're here. This is actually our 94th Glamour program, Dissipation of Glamour Initiative, and our 34th attempt to decipher the academic meanings, or at least to approach academically the material that DK gave his glamour group, so to speak, over a period of years. Just to repeat these ways of illusion: the way of wrong perception, the way of wrong interpretation, the way of wrong appropriation, the way of wrong direction, the way of wrong integration, the way of wrong embodiment, and the way of wrong application. Sounds a lot like Master Moria's castle of errors. He said it was built at the wrong time in the wrong place by the wrong people with the wrong materials for the wrong purpose. You know, he was piling up all of these errors in this castle of errors, and he wondered whenever the errors would finally cease. He also said, as I recall, that when errors are found in books, they are like sores. You know, they are like inflamed areas of irritation, and we all know what it's like to have a sore that is resisting healing. So it's going to contaminate the person who reads the errors in a book. So this is a call for fifth ray accuracy, and we tend, sometimes to look at the fifth ray and say, oh, do I really have to do that? And the answer is yes. I don't think there's a way to pass the, let's say, from the second to the third initiation without really employing the fifth ray. Remember that it's the Ajna center and the planet Venus, the fifth ray soul planet Venus particularly, that are involved in that illumination of the third initiation. And remember too that the fifth ray of all the ray lords is the most luminous of all the ray lords. So yes, we do have to go through the fifth ray process, and our technique of light has, making that beam of light from out the forehead, it's a pretty fifth ray technique. So brace yourself, because that's what we have to go through to get the factual material under our belt. Okay, so now we have looked at the 7 ways of illusion. It's kind of interesting that he uses the word way. He also speaks, in the use of the word way, about the way of higher evolution. It's altogether a different thing, but it's going to lead you into trouble. It's a path that you tread, and as a result, you commit errors and distort the ideas that are trying to come through those pure parts of the plan, and as a result, the plan simply does not manifest as it should. And everywhere you look, it's hard enough for us who study these things to be rid of glamour and illusion, and people are simply the victim of these things and don't know it. Now, as he says here, I'm going to just get one of my little brackets there. I have here outlined for you the causes and the various types of illusion. to which the disciple is prone. In its pure form, this illusion has to be met and someday surmounted. It has to be isolated and dispelled by the initiate. It is basically, the intuition which dispels illusion. It's the illumined mind which dissipates glamour, and the right use of the breath occurs in the devitalization of Maya, or we might call the dispersion of Maya. So the intuition is increasingly necessary in the dispelling of illusion, and that's why the antahkarana, which will give us some access to the intuition, should be built by the time that we are ready to begin dispelling illusion. So, and look at that word isolated. It's a fifth ray word. You think about a beam, a laser beam, which has an intense and narrow focus, and it isolates something that you really see clearly, and then you can be rid of it. But the mind alone, the normal concrete mind, is not enough to dispel illusion. So, kind of take notes as you go along about things you might want to discuss when we have our opportunity to do that. I don't know if in your life you've had the experience of dispelling illusion. We might say, that we have misunderstood something. And for a long time, we thought it was this way. And then later, years later, we say, aha, no. And it's in the word aha, the intuition acting. No, it's not that way at all. It's this way. And we see things in a new light. And so our formulation of what is truth is broken because it was inadequate. There was wrong interpretation of the idea and its part in the plan. And we see in a clearer light. Eventually, we see in the light of the Transcendental Mind. That's what it's called, Transcendental Mind. It's the same as the intuition. It's governed by the higher part of Mercury. There are a number of the intuitive planets that are useful. Jupiter, Neptune, they're all lending their intuition. But Mercury particularly, the god of pure reason, we might say, enters into our consideration, and we really then develop straight knowledge, not reasoning knowledge where we go from point to point to point in some kind of sequential, logical manner as we would under Saturn, Mercury, but instead more under Neptune, Mercury, Uranus, Mercury. We see things just as they are, and suddenly, in a flash of light, we can get a new understanding of something we had really misinterpreted for a long time. I imagine that when people change from a dualistic perception of their environment and suddenly see, wait a second, subject and object, hold on, they're the same. Subject is the same as object. That's an intuition. And the mind alone would, no matter how much it repeats that subject and object are identical, cannot give you that flash of intuition which reveals it to be so, and then only is the illusion of the difference between subject and object revealed. Okay, now let's see how some of the great ones use this. It has to be isolated and dispelled by the initiate. It was the final successful effort to do this that led Jesus upon the cross to cry out in words of apparent distress. Well, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Well, most people would say, oh my goodness, God has abandoned me. This is a terrible thing. But his limited conception of God was dispelled at the fourth initiation on the cross. And it says here, and think of it in terms of your own life, we have the theory all right, but do we have the realization? He then finally dissipated the illusion of the personal objective deity. And then this is quite a statement. A lot of people will say, well, this is a blasphemous statement. In the old days, that's what they'd say. At that moment, he entered fully into the consciousness that he was himself God and naught else. Well, the average believer, the average believer is still very much laboring under glamour and a lot of illusion. And if you present an idea like this to the average believer, it will be immediately rejected. What do you mean I am God? God is God and I am I. Okay, that's that well-fortified dualistic perception. But then something happens. The initiate Jesus was in the process of taking, excuse me, the fourth initiation, which is ruled by the fourth ray, which is connected with the buddhic plane and the intuition. And so this intuition, which dispelled the illusion of duality, descended upon him. And he could see it. It wasn't just reasoning. It was beyond reasoning. It was pure reason. It was pure realization. He entered fully into the consciousness that he was himself God and naught else. Now just think about that for a moment. See, we have to, well, a moment's not enough, right? We have to do this on a daily basis in our own way. But if we strip away all those false identities, even the identity of being the soul, of being the triad, even the identity of being the monad in the monadic vehicle. No, nothing else will do, really, finally, than being. Nothing else will do when we want to discover, what we really are. Okay. So that's the theory of unity outlined by him in the Gospel of St. Now look, watch out for when there's a mixture going on. DK said that one day the gold and silver threads of the Bible story would be disentangled. The gold threads are the threads of Christ's life and our great events, and the silver threads are episodes in the life of Jesus. So now when we look at who outlined the Gospel of St. John, we're much more likely talking about the Christ. But he doesn't always, he sometimes blends the two, so you should just be aware of who or what is the major influence. That the theory of unity outlined by him in the Gospel of St. John, chapter 17, that's the Christ, was indeed and in truth a fact in his own consciousness, established unalterably. Now maybe Jesus, standing by, heard very well what the Christ was saying about I and them and they and me and we and God and all that. We are in the Father. And it was a supreme statement of an initiate who was on the verge of taking the sixth initiation of identification. I call it that too. I mean, it's many things. It's the ascension, it's the choice, it's many things. But the Christ was like a sixth degree initiate hovering over the becoming fourth degree initiate of the Master Jesus. So Jesus obviously, was part of that whole exchange and listened carefully to everything that was being spoken as if through his own body. And then later he said, this is it. I'm understanding this. I would say the Christ then was responsible for uttering the words. We don't know yet about this divine mediumship. We only know this, that you have to be minimally an initiate of the second degree and have 6 petals open in your egoic lotus, fully unfolded, before it is possible to have this kind of cooperation such as Jesus and the Christ established. And even then it would be on a lower level. I mean, there was a kind of establishment of a rapport between Apollonius of Tyana at the 3rd degree and the becoming master Jesus at the 5th degree. This is later, after Jesus was crucified on the cross. So there's a 5-3 connection there, whereas in the case of Christ and Jesus, there was a 6-4 connection. Okay, so yet, nevertheless, let's see, wait a second. And it became a truth in his own consciousness, established unalterably. Now, we know in our own life the difference between a theory, well reasoned, and say, yeah, that's true as far as my logic goes, and that amazing impression of the truth of an intuitive fact when it really hits. And this is what we're talking about now, that unchangeable, straight knowledge of the truth as the intuition reveals it. Excuse me. Yet, nevertheless, in this infinite, supreme realization, there entered for a moment a sense of loss and of negation. Well, you're not going to have a causal body anymore, and the angel who has supervised you and been a source of great solace is returning to the heart of the sun, and the causal bodies being destroyed. There could be this sense of loss. There entered for a moment a sense of loss and of negation, forcing from his dying personality that tremendous utterance which has bewildered and at the same time comforted so many. See, is it said in grief and the sense of loss, or is it said in wonder? My God, why hast thou forsaken me? In other words, the realization of exactly why this God, known as the solar angel, has forsaken him, and his own conception of what God is has crumbled, and a much better realization now has come in, which is non-illusory. Now, these are very subtle matters, and maybe until we really go through them, we're not going to know what we're really talking about. But we get the hints about what some of these higher initiates are passing through and what we will be passing through increasingly. Okay, so it's comforted many because they understood it, and others have been bewildered and haven't known what in the world he's talking about. And it's like Jesus thought, the God of the planet or the God of the universe has left me all alone and I'm suffering and I feel terrible. It's not about that at all, okay? So what is it really about? This moment of disillusionment. What's it really about? And this signified the surmounting of the final synthetic illusion. That's an amazing statement. Well, the final synthetic illusion with regard to the illusions that are normally human. There are higher illusions, and DK talks about them, but about them we don't need to say very much, and we can't either. But the interesting thing here is that one sees the synthesis. I guess that's one of the ways of interpreting this. There is an illusion which covers everything and prevents you from seeing the synthesis, the oneness, and your own identification as God. There is that kind of great mistake about, what is God, what is man, and all that. And at this point, God and man, through the process of identification, become identical. That doesn't mean there's not a Sanat Kumara or a planetary God and all that, but it's all one being. That's the thing. It's all one being. And until we can establish in our consciousness the being of being, then, we're not close to what is being realized here. When that has been dispelled, this final synthetic illusion, as it can be understood in the human family, illusion as it can be understood in the human family disappears. Now, DK is being very careful, isn't he? And I just, basically said in a lesser way the same kind of thing, that basically there are higher illusions, okay? But as far as a human being is concerned, you are still a human being when you're a master, but when you're a Chohan, you're not considered anymore a human being. You are a member of the kingdom of souls, but what about a planetary life? You become a planetary life, and you're not a human being in the ordinary sense. You're not man in the ordinary sense. So we understand illusion in a certain way, and the higher initiates understand it in a much deeper and more expansive way. The man stands free. Now we know there's a great liberation at the fourth initiation, and we're basically moving out of the dense physical body of the planetary logos and the solar logos into the cosmic etheric body, and that's the liberation. Okay, we've got to free ourselves from this matter of the previous solar system, which represents the third ray and represents our bondage. And at this point, we do. There's a great achievement at this fourth initiation. And when DK says how does he say it? Those certain types will achieve during this round or this root race, some will achieve in the next root race, and some in the later root race, according to their fundamental ray. He's talking about the fourth initiation being the moment of achievement. The illusion of the mental plane can no longer deceive him. His mind is a pure instrument for the reflection of light and truth. I guess we're, think about that. We're still a long way from that. But if we keep reading with understanding Master DK, we come closer and closer. The glamours of the astral plane have no further hold over him. He just doesn't want the unreal things. He, if anything, aspires to true reality and knows what it is. And the astral body itself, as normally conceived anyway, fades out. It's not that level of matter disappears, otherwise you would have a gap, and in that gap you could die. That happens in a treatise on white magic. He says the Agni-Suryans drain away all of your astral energy, and there's nothing for the overshadowing soul to do except to just snap the cord and take a different incarnation, because it's too late. The magician has died. So it's not a question of being rid of that level of matter that vibrates to a certain frequency in which we call astral matter. It's a question of being rid of all the phantasmagoria on that level, which tends to form when we desire illusory things and when we desire that which is not true. And that whole confusing mess of wrong desire, that's what disappears. That's what fades out. So I guess you could say, wow, this is a really big moment of realization, and it's only intuition that is going to dispel the final synthetic illusion that we are not God, that we are not pure being. We realize ourselves as God, as pure being. That doesn't mean we are the personhood of the planetary logos. It means that logos too is pure being. You will remember, he says, that I hinted to you in a treatise on white magic that the astral body itself was an illusion, not the astral plane necessarily, okay? This is a subtle distinction, but what kind of forms appear in astral matter, that's where the mistake is made. When it's a vehicle for pure love and pure light and helps to establish the unity of things and reflects the intuition, then it is a reality. It is the definition of the illusory mind upon the mental plane of that which we call the sum total of the desires of man in incarnation. Now, this is the way of thinking of the illusion of the astral body. Let's take a look here, and we'll repeat it because it's kind of a difficult concept. I've always found it a difficult concept, but I've worked out something for myself where I think I understand just a little. You will remember that I hinted the astral body was an illusion. It is the definition of the illusory mind upon the mental plane of that which we call the sum total of desires of the man in incarnation. It's all these desires which are blocking the intuitive truth, which are the astral illusion. When illusion and glamour have both been overcome, the astral body fades out in the human consciousness. Now, notice what he's going to say here. There is no desire left for the separated self. And, what kind of desire is there? There's something. There's no desire left for the separated self. Kama manas, which is that mixture of desire and mind together, disappears, and man is then regarded as consisting essentially of soul, mind, and brain within the body of nature, but still the astral body is an instrument of love. And it is used, when you look at some of these people who are in the 10C groups, you see that the astral body is one of their instruments, but it has been so purified that it reflects love and intuition and is a way of contacting and uplifting other people who are still very much caught in the astral illusion that we call glamour. All right. Now, I'm glad he says the following. This is a great mystery. It certainly is, and every time I try to solve the mystery, I realize it is difficult. This is a great mystery, and its significance can only be understood when a man has controlled his personality and eliminated all aspects of glamour and illusion, because then the mind really reflects the soul. The mind reflects the soul on the higher mental plane, and the astral body reflects the intuition on the buddhic plane. And this is, I don't know, is this correct? This is accomplished by accomplishing, okay? This mastery is achieved by mastering. It's almost repeating the obvious, but what he's basically saying, that until you do it, you may theorize about it, you may even have the right theory, but you don't know for certain what is the realization. You don't understand the revelation until you do it. You accomplish it, you master it, and then you understand. This elimination of desire, and desire is never eliminated, but he's talking about a type of desire, which is desire for life within the phenomenal worlds that the Buddha spoke about, and how this leads to the pain and suffering of desiring unreality. Even a great logos has desire. Desire is a cosmic principle, but what is it aimed towards? That's the question. This elimination of desire is brought about by conscious eliminating. So it's so interesting. He's just defining the word by the word itself. Get therefore to work, my brothers, and clarification of the problem must inevitably ensue. In other words, he's telling us we live in a state of consciousness where the mystery, I think I'll write it down. Let's see if I can get it here. We live in a state of consciousness wherein the mystery cannot be fully solved until our state of consciousness changes. So get to it, eliminate glamour, eliminate illusion, understand their basis, and make the mind and the emotions transparent and receptive to the energies of the higher ethers, and then we will understand. So he's basically saying that our normal mental emotional equipment is insufficient really to understand this type of liberation which is being offered. So we have to see to the quality of our instrument and keep on improving it. When I think that, that's very obvious to those of us who studied these things a long time. A little bit more, maybe. A little bit more. That which is the opposite pole of illusion is, as you well know, the intuition. Now think about that. The intuition is pure reason. The intuition is things as they are. The intuition is straight knowledge. The intuition is the apprehension of archetypal relationship at a certain level. And it's not some confusion and misarrangement and misunderstanding. It is how things are. That which is the opposite pole of illusion is, as you well know, the intuition. The intuition is that recognition of reality which becomes possible as glamour and illusion disappear. And conversely, if somehow something of the intuition should get through into our consciousness, it will help glamour and illusion disappear. But pause there for just a moment and think about that sentence. The intuition is that recognition of reality which becomes possible as glamour and illusion disappear. So, in the Yoga Sutras, we still the modifications of the versatile psychic nature, including the lower mind and the astral body. We bring them into a state of stillness, and then we understand that the truth of the soul will really reflect itself in our consciousness if we're not always busy moving about false notions, false desires, useless desires. A stillness has to be pervading these areas of our mechanism in order for the higher energies to really get through. Otherwise, we distort and never recognize the higher energies. An intuitive reaction to truth will take place when, along a particular line of approach to truth, the disciple has succeeded in quieting, okay, either I read it or whatever, the disciple has succeeded in quieting the thought form making propensities of the mind so that light can flow directly and without any deviation from the higher spiritual worlds. So that's exactly what I just said. He says it much better, of course. And be still, be still and know that I am God. If everything is always in circulation, one thought after another, there's no way for the sun of truth to reflect itself in wholeness without getting all split up and disjointed and deflected, never getting through. Okay, so the disciple has succeeded in quieting along some line, some ray line, okay, quieting the thought form making propensities of the mind. This is straight Raja Yoga, isn't it? You've read the Light of the Soul, Alice Bailey's interpretation of the sutras, Yoga Sutras, which DK translated for her to interpret in that way, so that light can flow directly. See, this is silence, isn't it? When you think about taking your day of silence, your days of silence, you're going on a retreat, thinking of a week of silence, this is it. So that the higher worlds can get through all of the normal kind of truth-breaking interactions between all the parts and pieces that are floating around and activated in your mind and in your astral body. So, okay, so the quietness, and especially for the third-rate types, and every personality is generically on the third ray, as souls are generically on the second, as monads are generically on the first, whatever their actual ray might be. Light can flow directly and without deviation or deflection from the higher spiritual worlds. The intuition can begin to make its presence felt when? Now, first of all, he deals with the mind. Now he's dealing with the effect of intuition on the normal, glamorous astral body. The intuition can begin to make its presence felt when glamour no longer grips the lower man, and a man's low or high desires, interpreted emotionally or self-centeredly, can no longer come between his brain consciousness and his soul. There are just all kinds of interruptions, all kinds of distractions, and we have finally to undergo a course of elimination in order to participate in the purification which will allow truth to impress us directly. This is where you can find Pluto and Saturn really doing us a good service. Saturn sort of locates and forces you to confront the obstacle, and Pluto gets rid of it. Pluto, the great ejector. Get it out of your system, get it out of your system. That is Pluto. Fleeting moments of this high freedom. Fleeting moments, Uranus, right? Fleeting moments of this high freedom come to all true aspirants at times during their life struggle, because an aspirant will struggle, and humanity is Scorpio, okay, the struggling sign. They have then an intuitive flash of understanding. The outline of the future and the nature of truth sweeps momentarily through their consciousness, and life is never, again, exactly the same thing. They have had their guarantee that all struggle is warranted and will evoke its adequate reward. Now, think about, just for a moment, think about your life. Sometimes, I've taught classes and we talk about these moments, and there are certain moments in the lives of everybody which people tend to repeat. They say, well, you say, well, what experience did you have that? And they come back to that same experience when the doors of perception really opened into the higher worlds. It was so impressive. They don't care that they're repeating, because that was the moment when they really saw something, became conscious of something. But it is Raja Yoga and stillness and non-activity. In other words, the third aspect is always doing this. It's the non-activity and the tranquility associated with the second ray, not the activity associated with the third, which will bring in the buddhic impression in a way that will reveal something much closer to pure truth. I hate to say pure truth about anything because I know how many planes there are and how this refining of what is truth goes on, and the truth held today, looking so wonderful, becomes just a little part of some greater truth, and on in that way. But at least it's not the distortions of the dense physical body of the planetary logos or the solar logos. At least we have entered the territory of principled vehicles, which always begin with the etheric body and not the dense physical body. Okay. Now I think that's as far as we should go, and that's plenty, actually. It's plenty. And what I'll do, this is the 9th, right? Okay, so I'll put this in here, because if I don't do it now, I may never do it correctly. And whatever page we're actually on here, page 67, it appears. Excuse me. So we're ending with doggy. You know, if the dog is an example of the 6th ray and loyally follows the hunter Orion. And in doing so, I think has those 6th ray glamours cosmically speaking. But we'll worry about that when we get closer to it. Right now, we're quite a ways away. And we're starting here. That started on page 65, and we ended on page 67, I believe. Yeah, we did. And the next time we get together, it will be number 95. And academic reading will be the 35th. And it'll be the 16th of November. Yeah, it's a Friday. And we'll start with page 67. All right. Well, it's a wonderful book, very practical, deep, not always easy to understand. We have to do our best with it. Remember that the Tibetans started in a project that World War II kind of interrupted. He was going to lay out 10 seed groups, and he was going to have a personnel of 9 people in each one of those seed groups, except for the last one, which would contain, I think, 27 people. It would be the truly synthetic, magical 10th group. But he got as far as seed group number 5, and he did 1/3 of it only. He kind of brought 3 people together, and that was that. And the war interrupted, and in 1939, he discontinued that and reorganized everything in a much more consolidated manner, and temporarily dropped the 10 seed group fruition, which, since it is a 275-year project, beginning basically in 1925, I suppose you could think, then basically we have, 2000, 2100, 2200, up to the year 2200, it is operative. And he'll be back working on the externalization of these 10 seed groups, because they are the paradigm for how to serve humanity in the various areas where humanity needs service. All right. Now I open the door, the floor. I don't know how to do this. I can't get it all in at once. I just can't do it. And if I do it, I make it too small. Oh, well, I'll try, Anyway, more is under the eye than would be under the eye otherwise. So, your thoughts about these things? It's about illusion, synthetic illusion, oneness, identification. It's about the relationship between the intuition and the astral plane, and it's about banishing the synthetic illusion, and really learning how to let the intuition flow through the subtle bodies, which normally are filled with glamour and illusion. Okay, your thoughts and your questions. We can deal with those things now. So I'm on the outlook for anybody that would like
You have a question there from Yvonne in the
okay.
question box.
In the question box, I don't see the, goodness. Why don't I, oh my, somehow, Yvonne, could you put your question mark up so I can get to the question box? I don't know, BL, what's the matter here? Only when I have a question.
Michael,
yeah,
I can read it. I can read it for you. You should be able to undock your question block, but anyway, what she says was, can we have a copy of the chart? And that was the first chart that you showed. And then the reason you can't see the question mark is because Michael responded to her based on comments you've made before.
Okay.
As we understand it, that Tuija is working on it, and she will make it available once it's been
Exactly. Obviously, we have these in Cosmic Fire, and DK is the real author of these things, but Tuija has made them much more interesting and colorfully indicative, and so naturally there's more in Tuija's charts than we have in Cosmic Fire, so Tuija will have to come to grips with that and decide how best to distribute those. Okay. And okay, sure. We're working on that, Yvonne. We're working on that. And let's see. Okay, Michael did that already. Now I understand. Okay. Hey, I see the question. All right. Very good. Is there now other things, other thoughts? Remember, anything on occultism is fair game. If you want to stick to the subject, that's good. And if you don't want to stick to the subject, occultism is all one big sphere of knowledge anyway, so anything goes. we are like eagle eye. Okay, now, right, Yvonne, and there you go. I've got you on your microphone, Yvonne.
Okay, Michael, I thought that was interesting when he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I never realized he was talking about his solar angel.
I think, it's been I think that's part of it. That's part of it. And DK hints at something else. His own limited conception of God is no longer there. And so he could have said in wonder, I realize I am God. And why have you, my normal conception of God, gone away? In other words, a statement of wonder rather than a statement of grief. Those two things. Solar angels leaving. You're very familiar with the solar angel by that time. He accompanies you into the meditation, into the initiation chamber, all that kind of thing for the high initiate. And what's going on here is basically what he's saying. What is this change? But I think the solar angel is part of it. That's my impression.
Thank you.
One day we'll all see, right, Yvonne? We'll know. Now, there's, like they say, when you walk into a bar, choose your poison or name your poison. Now, how do we prefer to go out in the fourth initiation? Will we prefer, let's say, crucifixion? Which particular way of exiting? Or being alone in a dark, cold cave? How would that one be? If you were good at Tumo yoga, it wouldn't be a problem, right? Because you generate your own heat. It seems that in the Eastern tradition, there are less deaths, less agonizing deaths at the fourth initiation, and more a question of isolation and meditation. So I think there are different ways of going through the fourth initiation, but whatever it is, he says, it's such a difficult life, that few people would choose it, but it does bring liberation. So, what do you say? Next life? What do you think? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're on the outlook for you, whatever you want to say or write, or, we're looking for you. And, be brave, whatever. Nobody knows anything here. I mean, I don't, you don't. Look at, this is just the ABCs of occultism. So we're told, inquire the way. Now, there are four things we got to do, right? Inquire the way, obey the inner impulses of the soul, pay no attention to worldly wisdom, and set an example. But the very first thing is inquire the way, which means ask questions, not necessarily of someone else, but of your own deeper wisdom. But in a group like this, naturally, we can all aid in the answering of these questions, which probably, when you ask a question, probably a lot of people have the same question on their mind. Okay, Aryo. Okay, here we go, and there you go, Aryo.
Okay. I am not sure if this thing has been already discussed, but then I am just wondering then what is the DK's thing or thought about the abortion? Because now it is spoken that it is the woman's human right to make abortion.
I don't think, in general, he spoke about the complete mess that the sex question is in. And the Dalai Lama has said, well, it's mostly for the production of children. He has said, DK has not said that except to say that it's so serious, this problem of how to deal with the sexual question in humanity, that even hierarchy doesn't know where it will end. But I think if you put two and two together, well, and you feel a certain responsibility to the souls awaiting incarnation, the question will be answered on an esoteric basis. And my own opinion that abortion for convenience is probably not with the laws of nature and the laws of the higher worlds. Something has come to you. Why has that been? Now, there are all kinds of extenuating circumstances, terribly complex, and it's very, very important that there be a balance between men and women, very important. And that women, they are made to be secondary, and that cannot be allowed. Nevertheless, DK has not dealt with that question, but certainly Mother Teresa has, and Madame Rurik has dealt with that question. And she is not, she's not a friend of the abortion practice. But as far as I know, unless someone knows different, I have not seen DK deal with it except to talk about how very complex it is, how responsible we have to be about the whole sex question. We have to accept our responsibility, he says, and I suppose the major responsibility there, as the Dalai Lama would say, has to do with the incoming of children. Now, I can't even get into it. It's a very, very demanding thing. All I can say is I don't know of any references where he specifically deals with that. If somebody else knows about that, I'm happy to know about it. I have my own ideas. I have my own preferences. All of us have been men. All of us have been women. We're one human race. We know what it is to have children. We know what it is to be the father of children. We know it from both angles. And we do know that the incoming of souls into the right environment is very, very important. So how do we assume our responsibility in that regard? That's all I can say about it. Let's just say it's not all I can say, it's all I will say. And if we want to, have a whole, it's like seminar or something on that subject, then we might be able to treat it with a little, we might be able to scratch the surface. But he says it's a mess, and hierarchy doesn't know where it will end. So we have something to solve. And look, in a seventh ray age, under Uranus and ruling the sacral center, we are going to solve this problem. We are going to solve this, and the appropriate invocation of children who are suitable to the parents is going to be a fact. And one day, he tells us something very strange. He says, children will not be produced by the ordinary means. They will arise because of the interaction of the throat center. So it's almost like children, or the vehicles for children, will be sung into existence. And that, we're a long way from that. But it is a center which allows for the magical precipitation of form. And so, there are new ways of bringing in the vehicles for those who need incarnation. That's all I can say, Ariel, or all I will say. Okay. Okay, Sam, hey, all right. You're on.
Hello there.
Hi, Sam.
Something about illusion, ideology. As I understand it, an ideology is like a political or economic ideal based on some idea. And in itself, it's not an illusion, but only becomes so when it's when you go down the path of one of these 7 wrong ways, so to speak. Then it becomes an idol.
Yes, the term idol is very important. Idea, ideal, idol. Yes. And yeah, that's right. But the thing about that is, what does the concrete mind do to the pure idea? See, this, sometimes it may be very faithful, or maybe let's say the abstract mind is very faithful as possible to the pure idea. But by the time we get down to the concrete mind, we may have narrowed the idea considerably. So the focus on, go ahead.
It constricts and limits.
Yes, it can.
It formulates, and in doing so, and if that is, focused on to the exclusion of the other aspects of the idea, then you have a problem. And
you get all kinds of dogmatism and rigid thinking, and you get like only this formulation or only that formulation. I just think, look, you can't be baptized unless your head is totally underwater. No, you can be baptized even if your head is not totally underwater. And this will, you know what I mean? This will separate these people, and they will fight over this to the point that there are, 400 and something Christian sects that all emphasized one concretion or another. Well, that's hardly the great idea of purification, which baptism is representing. So we basically, here's the thing, in my view anyway, it's not that we want to get rid of the concrete mind because we need it very much, but the 6th sub-race of the fifth root race is going to introduce people to the abstract mind. And one of the reasons that the new esoteric schools exist is to get people out of, strictly speaking, only their concrete mind and get them into some wider perspective, which requires, however they do it, the building of the antahkarana. So we do need a change of mind in order to come closer to the truth and avoid the idle experience, you know. maybe
right. It's cultivating a higher mental bandwidth.
Absolutely. That's a good way of looking at it. That's a good way of looking at it. So, and as educators and teachers, you know, we have to lead people into a broader consideration. Now, you know, I sometimes have undertaken this in my life, and I have found sometimes a little success and oftentimes a lot of resistance, like the mind is really made out of concrete, you know what I mean? And it just, that's it. It doesn't want to change because the fear of changing the mind at that high level. Now, you know, an example of this, which everybody knows, if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell. Okay, now that is a formulation of an orthodoxy, a dogmatism, whatever, or maybe, who knows? I mean, maybe the Muslims have the same thing, and you know, about paradise and Muhammad, who knows? But it's such a rock in the concrete mind that they'll travel a little bit away from it, you know, maybe speculate a little, widen a little, and then they'll snap back into this concretion, and they're playing it safe, if you know what I mean. So to get rid of the concretions of the mental body, which are doing a lot of harm, you have to get rid of fear at the same time. Fear and concreteness and Saturn, they all go together, if you know what I mean. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? It's a tough one, but it will be dealt with. And you know, and the sixth ray going out of incarnation will make for less rigidity in the mind. You know how the sixth ray can just lock you in on a certain path and it gets very, very rigid. There's going to be more flexibility now, I hope, over the next century as more and more seventh ray souls come in, I hope. Anything else, Sam?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's it for now.
Ideal, which has mind and emotions, and idle. And you know, it's so stupid, isn't it? Think about it. The Westerners, with their limited mentality, they go over to India, they go to China, whatever, and they say the people are just worshiping idols made of brass and stone, and they have no idea of God. And the Westerners don't understand anything about the use of symbolism in these people who are apparently worshiping the brass and stone, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. It shows the limitations of the Western mind is what it does. Okay, now let's see. Right, I was somehow hearing my own voice here. Tuija, did you want to say something? Because I see you over on the staff side now. Are you there? Okay. Somewhere. Okay. Let's take a look. Anybody else?
Michael, I'm here.
Okay.
It just takes so long time, and I have to look the cat. Sorry.
Something, dear. There's a problem. Maybe if I turn off my, I don't know, because we're getting an echo. Okay. So, did you want to say something? Okay, maybe there's the problem with the phone.
I said no, because I have to look the cat.
We have cat issues today. One of our little cats had an operation, and the whole house is upside down. with this. But you know how it is, service to the lower kingdoms of nature. I think Tuija is a lot better at it than I am, but okay, we have to take care of the up and coming ones. In this case, a cat, and lovely little cat, but not doing so well health-wise at the moment, but we hope for better. Okay, and Veronica, okay, let's see what we've got here. Now, please explain the difference of the three techniques of the light, divine, indifference, the presence, and where does each apply? Well, the technique of the presence, when we get to it, applies to the dispelling of illusion, the technique of light to the dissipation of glamour, the technique of indifference to the, what was the word I used, dispersion. That's one of the words they use, the dispersion of Maya. So those are the three applications. Mostly the book is focused on the astral body because that's where the majority of the problem is. But for disciples such as we are, who are trying to understand a little something about the dispelling of illusion, then the technique of the presence will be utilized. What I did, you know, for our work in the Moria Federation is I kind of took DK's sort of hinted meditation about the presence, technique of the presence, and I modified it just a little bit, and it's one of the meditations that we use when we're studying illusion in the Moria Federation. We have to meet, surmount, isolate, dispel illusion. Well, we have to meet it, okay. Isolate it, in other words, it's sometimes very difficult in a whole range of possible errors to really zero in on what is the prevalent illusion of the time. Then what we need to do is get a big picture, which the intuition, first of all, the abstract mind can help, and then the intuition can help. And that bigger picture will help us overcome the limitations of our approach to this mental issue. So the mind is meant to be a united field. It said 3 minds unite, maybe even 5 minds unite. What do we need? Concrete mind, son of mind, abstract mind, transcendental mind, nirvanic mind of the atmic plane. One day, all of those various aspects of mind have to unite so we can access all of them just the way the Buddha could. But for now, let's build the antahkarana, which we can do in earnest as we begin to approach the second initiation and at least get some intuition in on it. Please say again what each word means. Okay, I said that the breath helps us disperse illusion. Maya. Maya is chaos. Maya is energies acting without restraint, without order, without reflecting the higher pattern, and just sort of, I don't know, kind of scattering what is intended to appear. But the breath is a principle of order. And if we get the breath working correctly, then we can bring rhythmic order into the etheric field so that the higher idea, as it descends towards the brain and into the etheric brain and into the brain, can actually put in a similitude. It can put in a correct image of what the higher archetype looks like, and it won't be torn apart by all these chaotic energies. So we use the breath to bring in a kind of order. Mercury is the transcendental mind. And look, if you put Saturn and very interesting in Einstein's chart, there was a Saturn-Mercury conjunction. So he had a good logical mind too, and he came up with very, very new ideas, new for the time. But I'm saying that oftentimes and most times, when you put Saturn and Mercury together, you get very good sequential logic. the person is reasonable. But when you put Uranus with Mercury, and really Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, then what you get is the sudden flash of intuition. And when you put Neptune and Mercury together, you really get that ability to go beyond the ring pass knot and get into the other person or into the other object so that you realize the sameness of you and whatever it is you may be perceiving. So usually Saturn, Mercury has everything to do with logic. Neptune, Mercury with identification, and Uranus, Mercury with the blinding flash of intuition, the revelation of pure reason. They're both very mental planets. Okay, so maybe I've, there are a lot of things to cover here. And yeah, sure. And Veronica, and there are a lot of things to cover. And when it comes to, maybe reviewing what has been said is useful, because you can always stop the video and say, wait a second, let me go back here, let me hear that again, et cetera, et cetera. I know I'm rolling along and things go by. So probably that's a good way to study. Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, DK is particularly going to teach us these three techniques, so how we can bring the etheric body, the astral body, and the mental body all into a condition of right receptivity to the idea that is trying to impress us with the truth. And it'll take a little while, for us to manage that. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay. Now let's see. Anything else? I think, Yvonne, we've gotten. What did you think of the election? What did I think of the election results? Well, let me, without getting too political here, our meditation is going to be on that a little bit. We're going to talk about wanting what the personality wants so badly that we're willing to distort truth and reality in order to get it. Now, I would say the United States is certainly in a crisis, and that this is a global crisis, and it has to do with Christ saying that I come to bring not peace but the sword of discrimination between good and evil, between truth and falsehood, and between the right-hand path and left-hand path. That basically is being acted out in front of humanity now. And we do have the idea that such are the incoming energies that the good will prevail. But there could be delay, and DK once told us of a possible 300-year delay if people, if humanity just would not get with the program. And that's a long time, and that's a lot of suffering. And you can see people everywhere who are in powerful positions acting on the basis of illusion, glamour, and Maya. It's just like so obvious when you study these subjects, they're not acting out of the soul at all. Now, a few representatives in government, you can see the soul shining through or trying to shine through, and it gives them a big struggle. Sometimes it's a struggle between being elected or having to give up their position temporarily or permanently because they're standing on a principle. We have seen this several times. We've also seen the abandoning of their post because they're just afraid they're going to be knocked out and not elected. We've seen a lot of things. We've seen principle, and we've seen fear operating. And I want to say we ain't seen nothing yet, because I think the next 2 years are going to be extraordinary in the contentiousness of the two brothers in Gemini in the United States, and I think it's going to have a reflection all over the world in terms of aligning and realigning allies and so forth. So I don't want to go too much further about it. I will just say that some momentum towards the path of selfishness now has the possibility of being slowed down or halted even. But we don't know, because everybody's going to fight to the last ditch for what they believe in, and the people who see less are willing to use all kinds of unscrupulous means to get their personality objectives enacted. So, I mean, it must be obvious from what I'm saying where I stand on these issues, but I made a big, when Tuija and I did this vigil, we were there for 17 hours until, sort of 6 o'clock in the morning our time. We emphasized the color indigo. We emphasized the second ray and the deep indigo of the second ray soul of the United States. I think that is the color that has to win, and not the red of Mars. There's a big difference between Mars and Jupiter, and the soul of the United States is the great Jupiterian second ray soul, and it will set an example all over the world. And Jupiter is the planet of vision, and I believe that lighting the way the United States is supposed to do, is a big Jupiterian thing that gives everybody a more expansive vision. And I'm just hoping that the principal players have the courage to fight their way through to this, into the indigo light, and that all of us as esotericists are working on the inside to make sure that the color indigo prevails. I'm not just talking about blue and red states, but you can make your own application. It's the personality and the soul. It's the deep indigo soul. I always think about Abraham Lincoln, a great second ray monad and second ray personality with a first ray soul. And I think about, what he might do as he fought for synthesis all the time and not dividing one from another. So I said I wasn't going to answer this question, but I guess I've wandered more deeply into it than I even intended to do. I thought a lot about the about the results, and I breathlessly watch the developments and work on the inside with the group to the best of my ability, because these results are just the beginning, and we have to protect the people who are bringing forward the soul in this big issue, and they can be protected in the light and through the solar angels and by the force of the Christ. Whatsoever shall be asked in my name, and with faith in the response shall see it accomplished. And I certainly ask for their protection every day. And that's what I thought of the election. Okay. Okay, friends, I think it's time for us to maybe to meditate, huh? And let's see if that question maybe brought us into the theme of our meditation, because let's see, over here are some first-rate glamours. The glamour of self-centeredness and personal potency. The glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and wide control. The glamour of selfish destiny and of the divine right of kings, personally exacted. These are ambient, they are present in the situation today. And I think what we'll focus on is the glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and of wide control. America was not meant to be that, and no modern democracy is meant to be that. And people who would rather live in ancient Rome and be a Caesar than a true leader of a democracy, they have a lot to learn. So we're going to work on the glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and of wide control, and try to dissipate that glamour and bring it more into the democratic ideal, where every individual counts and the will of every individual is allowed to have its expression, whether verbally or in written form or in voting form in some way. So let's focus on that one, okay? And I'll just copy this and hope that, let's see, where am I here? Okay. And this is Glamour World Problem. Okay, wait a second. Signs of triangles. I forgot to pull out of this. Here it is. Formula for the dissipation of world glamour. Okay, and this is the one we're going to deal with today. This one. The glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and wide control. You see this shaping up, and you see the possible subverting of American democracy, and you see the possibility that democracy all over the world could take a big hit. Democracy comes out of a hierarchy. We're not ready yet for the monarchy coming out of Shambhala. All of those monarchies, they are just reflections, and now they are constitutional monarchies. If anybody attempts to establish a personal monarchy in this day and age, they are against the plan. And later, when the will is understood, we can talk about the principle of monarchy coming out of Shambhala. Okay, now we meditate. Just get a drink of water. I'll be right with you. Okay. So, our first work is just in a few moments of silence. And thinking, of all of us as group brothers and sisters, we're here together and we're here to do a task. And in the silence, we feel a little bit of our unification or potential unification. And then we'll, this is dangerous work, actually it is, and the counterforce doesn't want this kind of work done, so we need the protective formula of the cross of divinity, and we say the protective formula. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light, I work, and from that point, I never move. And the light radiates from the cross individually and on behalf of the entire group. Now we focus the dual light of mind and matter, so the vitality of matter, we draw that light upward, imaginatively to the mental plane, and we also see the light of mind, which is vitalized by the light of matter. Two lights as one. We can think and we can be supported in our thinking by the vitality of matter and its light. And now we become aware of the light of the soul. We imagine that. It's as if we, somewhere above our head, let us say, we contact the soul light and get the feel of it. And we bring that light down imaginatively and see it fusing on the lower mental plane with the light of the concrete mind and the light of matter. All, I would say, on the fourth subplane of the mental plane. An area of coming together and of fusion. The light of the soul joins the two other lights, and three lights are as if one. And then, with that image of the triple light as one, we use the following little mantra, followed by the sacred word. The light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. So we have the triple light as our instrument, and it is an instrument of perception and an instrument of dissipation. So we're going to visualize, as we say the formula, we're going to visualize the great searchlight beaming forth out of the triple light as one, and we're going to turn that light imaginatively onto the astral plane where so many veils exist, so many clouds and fogs and miasmas, and we're going to use our light to detect where is the obscuration, where is the distortion, where is the blocking of the truth. And we will say then, watching our beam go forth as if from our own Ajna center and from the as it were, the group Ajna center. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth. The inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. And then we strengthen our beam with the spiritual will. We imagine the spiritual will applied from the monad, from the triad, from the jewel in the lotus and other parts of the egoic lotus, and from the head center and so forth. The spiritual will enters and strengthens our beam. And we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. That goal, of course, is the dissipation of those glamours which somehow work out as this glamour. The glamour of rulership, of dictatorship, and of wide control. So inappropriate in these modern days of growing Aquarian democracy. So think about for a moment what happens to a country when this particular glamour is strongly in effect, either in the consciousness of the leader or those who support the leader. What happens? Rulership, dictatorship, and wide control. And with those thoughts in mind, which of course, all these glamours lead to a reduction in the good and the effective and the progressive. Glamour never has a good result. It always takes away from what otherwise might be. With those thoughts in mind that you have generated, we will use the words of power. Then go into our silence concerning them. So these words of power, the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of rulership, dictatorship, and wide control. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of rulership, dictatorship, and wide control. Okay, now, according to your own methods, you're going to see our beam penetrating the glamour and producing its weakening and its dissipation, and all of this we will undertake in 5 minutes of silence. So according to your own approach. we can think about these things. It's not yet time, due to our failure to understand Shambhala and the will, for the imposition of the will of one over the will of the many. As a matter of fact, according to the Syrian law of freedom, the hierarchy may not impose its will on humanity. And even Sanat Kumara, who could absolutely impose the will, keeps his hand off. It is allowed to persuade, but not to compel. In hierarchy, it is allowed to persuade, but not compel. Now, maybe great planetary moments, the change of root races and change of forms and kingdoms, the will of Sanat Kumara will be imposed. But ordinarily, it is allowed that people develop and express their own will, and taken together, all those little wills of human beings combine to make the one will of humanity, and it must be given scope. The reduction of the will of the many to the will of one human being, or a few, is a huge diminishment of the intention of the superior powers. So democracy in these next years will be fighting for its life, and since it is that system of government coming out of hierarchy at this time, the students and practitioners of the ageless wisdom must fight on behalf of the preservation of democracy, so that the many, the will of the many, may emerge and be enacted. It deserves a lot of thought, a lot of thought. Now, let us withdraw our beam from the perceptive and destructive role it's had and bring it back to the mental plane, into the three lights as one. And we will continue to use our fortified beam as we interiorly tackle these obstacles to a better way for humanity and the planet. And now we will close with the sounding of the Om 3 times. One for each of the spheres to reduce illusion, glamour, and Maya. Okay, friends, we thank you very much for participating with us. And tomorrow we will have the work connected with the soul of nations. You know, there are some similarities here because the soul must emerge, and it's glamour, illusion, and Maya which get in the way of the emergence of the soul of the nations. When we had our vigil, it was all about the soul of America emerging and lighting the way. As influential as it is, many imitate what America does, for better or for worse, and so we want that deep indigo soul to come forward in loving understanding and love wisdom. And we'll talk about and meditate on the soul of nations tomorrow night. It'll be the 6:00 p.m. time GMT. Next week, both Tuija and I will be traveling, and I will notify you via the constant contact list. If you're not on the constant contact list, please write me or write Joe Walsh or write B.L. Allison, and you should be there, because then that will inform you of everything that is up and coming in our programming. So, thank you for your participation. Lots of love, many blessings, and let's continue to work with strength on the inside, identifying more and more as the soul behind the scenes, the one who can work upon the lower 18 or 21 subplanes, who can work successfully in changing the relationships on these lower subplanes until finally right relations exist. Okay, we'll be sending this out, and it will be available before long and put up either on Makara or YouTube or both. Let your friends know if they haven't had a chance to participate. They certainly can participate with the help of the video. And we'll see you then. All the best, and bye-bye for now.